And when Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero, the afternoon before his indictment, takes out the tickets and boarding passes in his name and those of his family, alarm bells go off in the United States. They knew that the Air Europa ticket was for the former Spanish president's family to travel to the Dominican Republic, but that afterwards the trip would continue to Caracas on a private plane. Who was chartering that plane?
What does make perfect sense to me is that he bought the ticket that very afternoon when he was notified and that he intended to flee. This intention to flee will probably lead to a precautionary measure being ordered. I don't know if it will be prison, but at least the retention of his passport. And to give Europe, all the countries around us, of which we are part of the European Union, inform them about his travel restriction. Otherwise, he might take the car, go to France, and leave from there. Well, I think the judge will have to decide that, and maybe even before his own statement, before June 2nd, which is when his statement is scheduled.
The prosecutors went further, stating in their complaint that appointments are based on ideological affinity. That happened in the Soviet Union. That's the nomenclatura, a group of people who, without any merit but totally loyal to the party, in this case, not even to the party anymore, but to Sanchez himself, are given the most important representative positions to keep everything completely muzzled.
Zapatero's situation, moreover, I understand from the source who passed this on to me, that he is really devastated because he is convinced that he did everything right. He lives in a parallel reality, convinced he's done everything right. Moreover, he said it in those 80 seconds of his message that everything has been declared, but of course everything is declared, but the alleged crime lies in where it came from.
That's right. We're talking about the figures for international development cooperation from the Spanish state for 2025, 4,500 million euros, 4,500 million euros. Let's analyze the amount of money that represents. Some people might even have to translate it or convert it to pesetas to really understand what it is, which is an enormous amount of money. And most of it has gone to entities that are, for the most part, very, very, very opaque. Because of this, we can think about it in the worst possible way.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.
Bienvenidos. Welcome, Confidentials. How are you? Thank you for being there. Strength and honor, and let's keep going because we're winning the battle. What we're going to tell you today is not trivial. It's no small matter, and the confirmation comes to us from the Dominican Republic, and it's very serious. According to our information, Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero, along with his wife Sonsoles Espinosa and their daughters Alba and Laura Rodriguez Espinosa, were planning to flee Spain this past May 19th, heading to Venezuela. I know the rumor has been around for the last few days, and we've talked about it here. I'm not talking to you about a possibility anymore. I'm talking to you about a certainty. According to the information we have, Zapatero, on the afternoon before, the afternoon of May 18th, 2026, last week he gets the tip-off, the information that the next day he is going to be charged. The secrecy of that order from Judge Calama is lifted. That tip-off makes him immediately buy the 4 tickets on Air Europa in business class to travel from Madrid on the 19th at 4:10 in the afternoon to the Dominican Republic. But he wasn't counting on something this program has learned exclusively. Look, all plane tickets, boarding passes have a barcode. It's called SSSS, Secondary Security Screening Selection. It's a scan that identifies who is on that plane, who the person is, which flight it is, and if there are any security protocols that need to be activated. Who verifies that control? The U.S. air security personnel. They are the ones who verify that control. And when Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero, the afternoon before his indictment, gets the tickets and boarding passes in his name and those of his family, all the alarms go off in the United States. It wasn't just another trip by Rodriguez Zapatero alone to Venezuela, like so many he takes. No, it was a trip with the whole family. That was what immediately alerted the United States and set security protocols in motion. The first of these was to contact Delcy Rodriguez. Don't forget that now Delcy Rodriguez is a main collaborator of Donald Trump and Marco Rubio in Venezuela. They knew that the Air Europa ticket was taking the family of the former Spanish president to the Dominican Republic. But then the trip continued to Caracas on a private plane. Who chartered that plane? That was the question, because there was no rental by Rodriguez Zapatero of any private plane to take him and his family to Caracas. Someone sent him that plane from Venezuela. According to the United States, it was Delcy Rodriguez herself. When the United States learns that their president, handpicked by Donald Trump in Venezuela, is going to get involved in this mess, to send a private plane to pick up the former Spanish president and his family and take them to Caracas, they forbid it. That adventure ends. They prohibit that flight. Some tell me it had already taken off. Others say it hadn't. It doesn't matter. That private plane never arrives in the Dominican Republic because Zapatero never leaves Madrid. Hours earlier, the news breaks. It becomes known that he is under investigation. And plainclothes national police, as we reported here, surrounded his house where he was in Madrid to prevent him from leaving, to prevent him and his people from catching that plane, to prevent him from fleeing. It would have been difficult for him because the government of Luis Abinader in the Dominican Republic is also willing to support Donald Trump at this time. And they would have detained Zapatero, or maybe something worse, to prevent him from leaving the country if he had arrived in the Dominican Republic. Therefore, the United States blocked it. They blocked Rodriguez Zapatero's initial plan, which was to flee. Delcy Rodriguez betrayed one of her own again. She already did the same to Maduro. She has done that to many people. To Alex Saab. Now she has done it to Rodriguez Zapatero. And maybe Zapatero has escaped from something much more serious than what could condemn him in Spain. And I tell you this because of the extradition agreements that exist between Spain and the United States. If the United States extradites Rodriguez Zapatero to his country in the future, due to extradition agreements made between both countries, he could not be sentenced to more than 10 years. This agreement, this treaty between the two countries was signed under the pretext of human rights, namely that the United States has life imprisonment and the death penalty. Therefore, Zapatero, if he is extradited from Spain, the maximum sentence in the United States would be 10 years. But if he gets caught fleeing, for example, to the Dominican Republic or another country, and he is arrested outside our country, then the full weight of the law can fall on him. He could even be sentenced to life imprisonment. The situation of Rodriguez Zapatero therefore becomes more complicated. Judge Calama knows that he tried to escape. The United States informed him that they managed to stop him. And from what I've been told, now a lawyer who is part of the prosecution will tell us more. His daughters and his wife are going to be charged in the next few hours. According to the information we have, the former Spanish president is considering protecting his daughters and his wife, leaving them out of the case in exchange for his confession to the anti-corruption prosecutor. Prosecutor Luzon does not accept this kind of deal, as he did with Aldama, unless there is a full confession. And they're telling us that Zapatero would even be willing to publicly expose Pedro Sanchez if necessary. Folks, it's either a scare or death. Right now, it's just the scare. Death, maybe, if the Americans had caught him in the Dominican Republic fleeing from Spain. And this situation happens even though Alex Saab, Maduro's frontman, or Polo Carvajal, the head of Venezuelan intelligence, still haven't told everything they know. They have a lot of information about Zapatero. He knows what he's facing, which is years in prison, but only if he accepts his sentence, telling them about the transfers, the countries, the deals, the illegal commissions, everything he did. Only then would he save his daughters and his wife from a possible prison sentence for them. And finally, they tell me something else that I find surprising, but they insist that they believe it will happen. I'm passing it on to you. Look, next week on June 2nd, Rodriguez Zapatero has to appear before the judge and will likely have precautionary measures imposed. It's almost certain that his passport will be taken away, and some people think that maybe even pre-trial detention. We'll see. But what sources very close to the investigation tell me is that he could be arrested earlier, that Rodriguez Zapatero could be arrested this very week. To prevent destruction of evidence or another attempt to escape, it would be a drastic decision, but backed by the information the judge has, which was provided by the UDEF. I'm telling you part of it here. Will we see Zapatero arrested this very week? Will we see him placed in pretrial detention before June 2nd? Will he make a deal with the prosecutor's office? I'm telling you that Sanchez knows that Zapatero could reveal everything to save his own skin before saving the prime minister's. And at Moncloa, they're in crisis, on high alert. They've been like this for a long time, but never like these past few days. That's why Sanchez is rarely seen in public and tries to leave the country on any excuse so he doesn't have to stay in Spain. A critical situation, yes, one we've been living through over the past few hours and one we're reporting exclusively today. It seems like a movie, a TV series about mobsters, corrupt officials, and criminal organizations that betray each other, handle off-the-books money, have tax havens, and flee justice. That's what we're talking about, a criminal organization that has been ruling Spain for 8 years with the help of others. There will be more. The lawyer for the case will give us more information in a few minutes. Welcome, we're investigating.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.
Ladies and gentlemen, things are happening, a lot of things. I receive a lot of information, some of which I just told you about, and others I want to discuss with counsel for the private prosecution in the cases against Begoña and Zapatero, which is involved in all of them. You know him well, Javier Perez Roldan. Hazte oír. How are you, counsel?
Hello, well, I'm busy, just about to head to Badajoz. I'm leaving soon.
Of course, because it starts on Wednesday, although it'll be a little while before we get to Sanchez's brother's testimony. Clarify something for me. Have you already requested that Zapatero's daughters be placed under formal investigation?
We have requested that both daughters and Zapatero's wife be placed under formal investigation. The wife, well, this might sound familiar to the viewers as a gratuitous beneficiary. And why? Because there is a relevant payment for analysis worth 490,000 euros in a bank account where the account holders were Zapatero and her. So even if she didn't know anything about the crime, it's clear that she has benefited as a gratuitous beneficiary. And the daughters, well, their companies were the ones that served as a method to receive money and deposits were made. There have been several deposits, one of 240-something thousand euros, another of 199,000 euros. So what we're asking is that they be formally investigated so that they can defend themselves. We are precisely defending that they have all possible tools, that they can be accompanied by lawyers so that later they can't talk about defenselessness or mudslinging or anything like that.
All right, counsel, I mentioned it at the beginning and I want to discuss it with you, and I'm sure you've already heard about it. I've heard that Zapatero is considering reaching an agreement with the anti-corruption prosecutor's office in exchange for protecting his daughters, Salva and Laura, and his wife, Sonsoles. that they don't go after them, and he would confess everything or almost everything because the anti-corruption prosecutor's office doesn't accept that he only confesses to part of it. Have you heard anything about this?
That rumor exists, and I understand that it's believable that he's considering it, but now not just for his two daughters and his wife, but for himself as well, because cooperating with the prosecutor's office could reduce a possible sentence for him. What's the issue? How much does he want to cooperate? Because what's clear here is that if Zapatero has been influential, it's because he's exercised influence somewhere, and that somewhere is in the government, not just in Plus Ultra. Because someone who has the ability to influence doesn't just influence one business, he influences many. And will he be able to point to Sanchez and to all his ministers who were involved? Because there are two ways here. The UKIO report itself, which was made public this weekend, there's the Abalos route to get closer to the Council of Ministers, and the Zapatero route to get closer to the Council of Ministers. Of course, if he's going to cooperate, what he'll have to say is whether Sanchez, or if not Sanchez, which ministers knew perfectly well that they were rescuing a company that didn't meet the requirements. That's on one hand, and on the other hand, he'll bring to light all the other business dealings and influence peddling that have taken place there. Which will be a lot, because there's a connection we've talked about before on your show, and that's the connection with China. It already appears in the UCO report. It's just mentioned very incidentally as Zapatero mediates for the purchase by China or Chinese companies of Venezuelan oil. That Chinese connection is extremely important because, among other things, the current government has bought Chinese products for the army when there is a NATO ban, Chinese equipment, Chinese military equipment. When it turns out that communications at the Prime Minister's office are controlled by Chinese companies, when it turns out that our social security data, including our health status, are controlled by Chinese companies. All Chinese companies must follow the patriotic law requiring them to report everything to the Chinese government, that is the Chinese Communist Party. So he'll have to follow every lead, not just the Plus Ultra one.
People who know Zapatero and who I'm told are in contact with his circle tell me that he's capable of offering Sanchez's head to save Sanchez's family and his own. Do you not know him personally, or do you?
I don't know him personally. Well, I've been near him twice, but I don't know him personally. But there's one thing that really defines his character. When the formal charges comes to light and he decides to record a video and make some statements in a video, he constantly talks about himself, knowing that his daughters were summoned, that they're mentioned throughout the whole investigation. He didn't talk about them at all. This means he's heartless. He has absolutely no love for anything except himself. And so, logically, if he didn't care about his daughters in that recording and has shown he has no scruples, how many fewer scruples is he going to have when it comes to Sanchez? By the way, he got along very badly with him because they only started to mend their personal relationship after Zerdan's arrest, when Zapatero then took charge of the Socialist Party's organization. For a few days, Sanchez is knocked out, and Zapatero is the one who starts to bring order. What does this mean after all? That in fact the interests of both sides were very intertwined, the interests of Sanchez and those of Zapatero and his circle.
That any of them could betray the other. Allow me, Sanchez shared an account with Begoña Gomez, which she used to register the software at Complutense University. They are married under a separation of property regime. But could that implicate Sanchez because he benefited from that money?
Sanchez would be an unwitting beneficiary. What does this mean? It means an unwitting beneficiary is someone who doesn't know a crime is being committed, but without knowing it is benefiting from the crime. How? For example, let's say he was unaware of everything his wife was doing, but his wife deposits an amount from an illegal activity into a bank account where he shares 50% ownership. Therefore, he is sharing in the proceeds of a crime as an unwitting beneficiary. And therefore, of course, he should and can be a party in the case. And indeed, if this is confirmed, what we are going to do is file a new indictment, including Pedro Sanchez as a party to the case, at least as a beneficiary.
And the last one, and if you allow me, this is information from a personal investigation that reached our program just a few hours ago. I've been told that he and his family were trying to flee on that Air Europa flight they had booked on the day the court order suddenly came to light. In fact, some people say that one thing is related to the other, that someone made the court order come to light, that the secrecy was lifted precisely to prevent that trip, right? We've even reported that Delcy Rodriguez was sending a small plane to the Dominican Republic to pick him up. That factor plus the UDEF reports, could they lead to the arrest, which is what I've been told, of Zapatero before June 2nd?
It could be, if it's confirmed. Let's see. That theory is perfectly possible, although with some added details. It's not that the court order was brought forward because Zapatero was leaving, because sources here in Madrid had already been saying since the previous week, and everyone was telling me, including my colleague Nuna Lozano, that it would come out on Monday or Tuesday. In other words, the court order was known about beforehand. What does make perfect sense to me, because he bought the ticket that very afternoon when he was notified, is that he intended to flee. This intention to flee will most likely lead to a precautionary measure being ordered. I don't know if it will be prison, but at least the retention of his passport and notifying Europe, all the countries around us that are part of the European Union, that his freedom of movement has been restricted. Otherwise, he could take the car, go to France, and leave from there. Well, I think the judge will have to decide that, and maybe even before his own statement, before June 2nd, which is when his statement is scheduled, because that's a rumor that's going around. And usually the rumors you hear in these circles almost always end up being confirmed and turning out to be true.
That's not even mentioning the president's brother, which we'll cover soon. I'll let you get back to work, Javier. Take care.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to remind you of two things.
Please.
Precisely, A plus ultra. What we have also requested is that everyone who was in the Council of Ministers be charged. For example, Pablo Iglesias, for example, Garzón, for example, Maroto, they no longer have parliamentary immunity, and therefore the National Court can investigate them. Why? Because if what happened here was the granting of an illegal aid to Plus Ultra, anyone from the Council of Ministers who signed the resolution can be held responsible. We can't currently investigate Sanchez because he has parliamentary immunity, nor the rest of the ministers who also have immunity, but we can investigate those who do not have immunity. Second, I'd like to thank everyone who collaborates with Actuil, and I'll explain why. Because in the UKO report that was made public about the Begoña Gomez case, an investigation is mentioned that was carried out by people who usually collaborate and help Actuil for free. Well, they did a test. They went to the website where the software was once uploaded and saw that it was indeed operational. They ran a trial. Well, we included that trial in a document submitted to the court, and the UCO basically states that this trial also mentions other cases. But specifically, it says that this trial serves to prove that it was open to the public. It's true that it was open to the public. It was undeniable, so undeniable that even Begoña Gomez's own lawyer had no choice but to admit it, and he admitted it before this report. But all those who truly help us selflessly, well, they deserve to be mentioned.
No doubt.
I mentioned them, and I want to give them my most sincere and heartfelt thanks.
We're all in this together, in the same trench, I have no doubt. Councillor Javier, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. We'll keep investigating.
I have to run now, so I'm speaking quickly.
Thank you, lawyer. Take care.
Castillón Confidencial by Albert Castillón.
You already know our podcast, Castillón Confidencial. Now we're taking it a step further. The new online news outlet is here. CastillonConfidencial.com, exclusive interviews, current news, and the latest updates, all in one place. Come on, get to know us and subscribe. It's free. Don't miss anything. CastillonConfidencial.com. The information that matters, the truth without filters.
Friends, I keep receiving a lot of affection from you, from people who were at the March for Dignity. For example, Roberto Vasquez has made a donation to the program and says, I can't just stand by and watch our country be destroyed while you try to save it. Thank you for everything, Albert. It's not just about one person, but if one doesn't start, the rest won't join in. And this is everyone's responsibility. Notice that just yesterday morning, I still had to listen, for example, on copy, right? Information from a network close to the right talking about the big demonstration over the weekend in favor of housing. 80,000 people. As big news about ours, almost nothing. Or Federico Jimenez Los Santos openly criticizing those who went to that demonstration, saying, "What's this about civil society?" That doesn't exist, Federico said. Here, everything has to go through parties. Do we really think they should run everything? Look, it's one thing if you want to get paid by the parties, something he knows how to do well. But civil society, no, please, don't dismiss the power of the people. I don't want to get into controversies, but I do want to say that I'm still very proud of what happened. I'm receiving messages from Venezuela, from Panama, from Colombia, from people who have seen the videos, even though they don't appear on Spanish or international television, and they're moved. And from you, who keep leaving me messages like these, Fernandez, Minerva, Margarita, or Ana.
There's no doubt that the demonstration on Saturday, May 23rd, was a complete success. Even though they tried to silence it in the media, thanks largely to social networks, the message got through.
Well, the march was exemplary, a success, and you could tell that the end of the event wasn't going to be spoiled. The police went after Lucho. The man is in his 70s. They hit him hard with batons, fired tear gas, and rubber bullets.
I was able to attend the demonstration on Saturday, and I'm very happy. I wanted to thank you because it was also thanks to you putting us in touch. It was all very emotional, and we are very happy and very grateful because only the people can save the people.
This message is to ask Marcos de Quinto, please, when we can organize another demonstration, not just in Madrid, but across Spain.
That's right, Ana, thank you. There was some police action, very little, but there was. Pepe is asking about them.
It's also sad to see how the police, the UIP, charge against the protesters without anything happening, without any riots, without any damage to public property, no cars set on fire, nothing.
Look at the scene. That's how it was. A small but very violent charge by the UIP. No one here threw a stone or broke a trash can. Poor Lucho, who got in the front row, got hit. And also Maylene, who is an informant, has left us an audio message and sent us photos of the bruises.
The march was peaceful, but those of us who wanted to keep moving forward and reached a certain point, I don't even remember where, well, we were caught off guard. They caught me from behind and didn't even give me time to keep walking. They just kept pushing me and hitting me the whole time. A police officer said that I grabbed him by the vest, and after so many blows he gave me, I ended up unconscious. And when I woke up, I was next to a SAMUR ambulance, with my hands cuffed behind my back, and since I was lying on my back, the handcuffs hurt my hands. They say they didn't hit me on the head, but I say they did, and that's what caused my migraines. Yes.
She has marks on her arms from batons and on her legs. Take care, Maylin. Get well soon. Absolutely unnecessary violence, because even if they wanted to approach Moncloa, they weren't doing it with flares or lit torches or throwing stones. That kind of thing is left for left-wing demonstrations. So I think those were unnecessary and excessive police charges. The person who was there is Francisco Vendala. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for coming with us.
No, thank you, Albert, for taking us. Thank you for everything you're saying in your reports, which is the absolute truth. I'm with you there, but above all with Spain, with the real Spain, honest, decent, hardworking, the one that wants peace and wants a country, a nation, a homeland as it has always been, Albert. The good people of Spain have been there because it's the only way to get out of this terrible tunnel from which I believe little by little, judging by the news we're getting, we're starting to see the light at the end. So really, Albert, thank you. Thanks to all the news outlets that were there supporting you, supporting Spain, well, and thousands of people, those who are being exposed. Because of this, it's precisely the Popular Party Jimenez, Los Santos, and others, now it can be said that you are comfortable with this situation. You are comfortable with Sanchez, with the despot, with the tyrant. You actually like this absurd two-party system that's ruining us. Albert, that's the problem. Those TV stations, you're being exposed because now it can be said, you are accomplices. You are accomplices because you're proving it. And there is the evidence you provided, Albert. They stay silent or say or criticize, no, you are accomplices of this individual and those who are with him.
How can you silence civil society and say it doesn't represent anyone? Please, that would be going too far. More, Fernando, Juan Antonio, Domingo, and Nikki.
Just a word to those of you who attended the march on Saturday, May 23rd in Madrid. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was a success. And they were saying,
it was a success, they were saying on TV. Pedro was saying 30,000 people, 40,000 people. 3 Bernabeus, 240,000 or more.
My congratulations on the demonstration to all my fellow countrymen. I couldn't attend due to personal circumstances, but without knowing any of the attendees and seeing today's images, I feel all of them close as my fellow countrymen, as if they were my brothers.
A success. And hopefully very soon we can kick out this criminal who is misgoverning us from La Moncloa.
An unprecedented success. I said it yesterday. Something like this had never happened before in a democracy. Without unions or major parties calling for it, none. Neither the Socialist Party nor the Popular Party. And 200,000 or however many came out. Certainly more than 150,000 were out on the street at that moment. Roberto Crobu, you must be happy too, I'm sure, because you like civil society, right?
Absolutely, Albert. Absolutely, Francisco. Glad to be here. Congratulations on the initiative. In the end, I couldn't make it. I was following you.
I missed you. They were asking about the bald guy at the protest. Just so you know.
Look, I'm telling you, but let me tell you something else. Look, I didn't go because there was a whole mix of reasons. On a personal level, because I'm coming off a complicated week. And, well, I have to pay attention to a few things, which are some appointments I have in the next few days. I have to prepare for them. And then there was also an issue with the connection. The timing was such that I'd have had to rely on Oscar Puente's trains. I was going to spend $100 just to get to Madrid. And with the way the trains are, I didn't even have the guarantee that I'd get there on time. I was arriving with barely a 10-minute margin. And since the trains are constantly, you always know when they leave, but you never know when you'll arrive, I was running the risk of not making it in the end.
Hey, let's get to what's important. We started the show today by explaining something that I've heard you mention on your YouTube channel. Judge Calama is going to charge Rodriguez Zapatero's daughters and wife. Everybody knows this. Lawyer Perez Roldan just told us this. Therefore, Zapatero is going to reach an agreement. I am told he's going to tell everything he knows in exchange for dropping the charges against his wife and daughters. And if he has to take down Sanchez, he will. People who know him tell me that, well, it's not like they're not really that close. Until a few days ago, they got along terribly, right, Robert?
Well, but I think anyone, that's just human psychology. Any parent, when choosing between a friend and their daughters, chooses their daughters. Even more so when your wife is also involved in the process. That is Zapatero's situation also, from what my source tells me, is that he is really devastated because he is convinced that he did everything right. He lives in a parallel reality where he has done everything right. Also, he said it in that 80-second message that everything is declared because, of course, everything is declared. But the crime is there. The alleged crime is from the start, right? So that's where the issue is. He knows he got his daughters in because they were his daughters. And his daughters accepted that because he was their father. Most likely, they wouldn't have gotten into that business if someone outside the family had asked them. So he's really sung. He feels indebted. He feels guilty. That's the big difference between Zapatero's personality profile and Pedro Sanchez's. because Pedro Sanchez is capable of selling out his wife, his mother, and we don't even know about his daughters because nobody knows Pedro Sanchez's daughters. They say he has daughters. We assume he does, but we don't know what kind of relationship he has, right? He's a pretty cold and very calculating person. Zapatero is also like that, but when it comes to the immediate family, in that sense, if he has to choose between, we shouldn't forget one thing, the daughters are young. He will most likely go to trial, and given how things are nowadays, it will be pretty much like Jordi Pujol, who will go to trial in 10 years. And well, we'll see under what conditions, right? But the daughters are young. The daughters are young and could face years in prison that may impact them. So in that sense, it's pure psychology, really. He's going to drag Pedro Sanchez down. He'll say whatever it takes precisely to protect his daughters.
Sure. Meanwhile, what is the government doing? Well, they're trying, some malicious people would say they're buying witnesses. No, come on, please. The Spanish government would never do that. No. But coincidentally, this man you're about to see is Raul Blanco. He was president of Renfe. In 2018, he was a board member of CEPI. That is when the bailout of Plus Ultra was approved. He voted in favor. He is currently under investigation by the National Court and the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. He is from the PSC, very close to the PSC. Well, according to what I've been told, they're going to appoint him as the CEO of Indra, which is a very high position, a monumental promotion. Monumental. I mean, it's so monumental that they want to raise the salary of the CEO of Indra to almost 5 million euros a year. Almost 5 million euros. What is this? A promotion, or are they buying him off, Bendala?
Well, Albert, to me, it's obvious that he's being bought. He's being bought, and he's being bought again. Because this has been going on for a long time. CEPI, we also know what it is. I mean, it's not a promotion. It's a way to secure what Pedro Sanchez has been preparing for a long time, the upcoming elections. And for that, Indra is essential to him, just like Correos, those regularizations and those nationalizations. That's where the key lies. Albert, it's been the key for several elections now. Pedro Sanchez owes much to Indra, as well as Correos and others, as we've discussed. So what do? We buy him back. The problem is that these gentlemen, whose identity we know, let themselves be bought. They sell themselves to the highest bidder. And there's no doubt that there are some, in this case, Sanchez does pay traitors, Albert, and that's something that civil society, which we're talking about, also needs to become aware of. That's what needs to be dismantled, because as long as this isn't dismantled, and it's hard to believe that people like Los Santos, Cope, and others, it seems like they don't want to dismantle it. Well, we'll stay exactly the same, Albert. It's a purchase, and he sells out, and if we don't stop this, there's nothing we can do.
Another case is that, honestly, everything surrounding the corruption around Zapatero and Plus Ultra is under suspicion. The Plus Ultra prosecutor, Luisa Lop, you can see her, was controlled by the criminal organization led by Zapatero. The leadership boasted about having her under their control. She closed the Plus Ultra case and requested its dismissal several times. The judge did not allow it, but the prosecutor kept requesting its dismissal over and over again. This prosecutor was promoted after doing this by Alvaro Garcia Ortiz to a much better and better paid position as prosecutor of the National Court. In other words, if you're a friend of the organization, you help them and they don't forget about you. You end up in a high position. But in both cases, another theft and we're the ones paying for it. The Socialist Party doesn't pay for this.
Always. They always operate with other people's money. They all do it with other people's money. And we must not forget that this news should also be read along with another one that came out today, that the Association of Prosecutors, I'm reading it on another screen, they're challenging the Attorney General's office appointments in European courts, arguing they're not merit-based. That's very important. They're not there on merit, are they? For them, merit means being loyal to the party, being loyal to the interests. Just like what was done with the liaison prosecutor with France and Switzerland. her term basically ends in August. They're going to replace her. That's not a punishment. It's taking advantage of the situation to put someone in who they can control. That's the point. Just imagine all of this has come from the prosecutor's office for liaison with France and Switzerland from an international investigation. What triggered all of this is an international investigation coming from France and Switzerland. They have the person who's now the prosecutor who keeps quiet, does the work very thoroughly, and opens the investigation in Spain. Normally, according to what is expected in the government, in Sanchismo, that prosecutor would have previously leaked that information to her superiors and would have asked for permission before acting. So now they want to make the change to put someone they can control and who can inform them so that things don't catch them off guard, like what just happened.
Tremendous. And I think this image really captures everything we're talking about. We showed it yesterday. I think you should see it again. You can see the owner of Plus Ultra with a plate of oysters and French champagne. That's Rodolfo Reyes, the CEO of Plus Ultra. Later, he was detained due to his connections with Chavista officials and so on. They're celebrating the bailout. And he sends the photo to friends, and Zapatero congratulates him. But there's something else. He sends Zapatero's frontman, Julito Martinez, a WhatsApp message, according to the UDEF published by La Razón, that says 10K done. You send this photo and post 10K done. We have been asking around in the business environment, in the corporate world, among multinationals. They tell me that 10K done would mean 10 kilos completed. Are we saying that he's going to pay 10 million to Zapatero? Is that it? 10, that's what I understand. The oysters, the champagne, saying 10 million are for you, right? 10,000 done. Let's see, you've worked in espionage, Bendala.
That's about right. That's about right, for sure. I mean, there's no other way to understand it. In the world of, let's say, bribes, alleged bribes, in the world of irregular payments, in the world of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours is crystal clear. But you also have to understand who the people are, both of them. And then the message sinks in perfectly. We're not talking about just any two people walking down the street. We're not talking about someone who just works and says to the other, hey, this and that. No. We're talking about Zapatero and this individual. They're celebrating one of the biggest scams we've seen in recent times, and we've seen many in Spain. So it's obvious that's the case. And what we need to realize is whose hands we're in. Look, you're saying it, Roberto. The prosecutors have gone even further. They've said in their complaint that prosecutors are being appointed based on ideological affinity. That used to happen in the Soviet Union. That's the nomenclatura, a group of people who, without any merit, but totally loyal to the party, in this case, not even to the party anymore, to Sanchez himself, they're given the most important positions to keep everyone perfectly gagged. Well, this is the same thing, and this is where Spain has ended up. Albert, what we're seeing is really terrible. And what we need to understand, what we want, is to be able to see everything with a fresh perspective and for much more to come to light. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, Albert.
I'm with you because tomorrow Araujo will be here and I want to play him a recording that I want you all to listen to. It's acted out. The voices you hear are not the original ones. Again, it's between the owner of Plus Ultra, the one with the oysters and champagne, and Zapatero's front man. And they say this.
My namesake and Zapatero are going to Caracas to monitor the election's fairness. Zapatero is in charge here.
My namesake and Zapatero are going to Caracas to oversee the fairness of the elections. Those are the ones Edmundo Gonzalez won and they stole from him. In other words, they already know there's electoral fraud and Zapatero is going to oversee the fairness. And they laugh. But what is this? Let's see,
Es la zorra. It's the fox that's guarding the hen house.
But come on, they know what they're doing. They know it's illegal. They delete messages. They split the money. They They enable the fraud carried out by the dictator who funds them. That's how it is.
And there's more, Albert. What you've said is just the tip of the iceberg. There are two things that aren't being talked about, but they're going to come out. The first one has already come out. I don't know if you've heard. My friend, Guillermo Rocafort, had used the transparency portal to push the government to disclose the cancellation of Venezuela and Cuba's debt in 2021. Carlos Cuerpo appealed it, won the appeal, then it was taken to the Supreme Court. Now they have lost. And the government has to reveal all that information. It has to make public the information about why Venezuela and Cuba had their debt forgiven. And everything can come out of that. For me, that's Pandora's box. But be careful, because there's going to be another element that we need to start considering, because this could link the whole Plus Ultra operation, even to new drug trafficking routes. And the thing is, no one has talked yet about what Zapatero's role might have been in Spain's change of position on Western Sahara. Because that would complete, it would be the missing link that would complete the whole operation, so that Plus Ultra could operate from Venezuela to Africa. And from Africa, open a series of routes for what is said to have exceeded the permitted weight of those planes.
The white packages, right? The video of the white packages. That is to say, gentlemen, we're here talking about influence peddling, money laundering, the frontman's accounts for Zapatero in the Virgin Islands, but we haven't even started with the drug trafficking. That's what Roberto's saying, and he's absolutely right, because this smells like drug trafficking everywhere. There is more than enough evidence of Zapatero's influence, for example, in Sanchez's government. When he starts making deals with China, selling Venezuelan oil to the Chinese and putting Huawei everywhere. Even Sanchez back in the year 2021 speaks well of Huawei. Listen to him when he pushes for the implementation of 5G.
Before the end of this year, 75% of Spanish territory will have access to the technology, to 5G technology. And we're doing that with different companies, including foreign ones. Not only with Huawei, and therefore with this Chinese company you mentioned earlier, but also with Nokia and other European and American companies.
Always speaking well of Huawei. Can anyone really believe this man didn't take the biggest cut? When, as you say, he changed international policy based on what Zapatero ordered him to do. Now you get closer to China, now you distance yourself from the Sahara, now forget about Guaido, go with Delcy, with Maduro. Everything was determined by money, by business. The more money, the bigger the criminal organization behind it. And foreign policy was subordinated to that. It's more than obvious. I get the impression, because they say the case file will come out this week with the reports we have from UDEA, there's not much more to know. That is, the case file will just have to organize what we already know. Do you see any chance that Bendala could get out of this?
No, not me. I think Zapatero is caught this time, really caught. And another thing is that he's going to try to maneuver, and like you said, since there's no loyalty among thieves, no honor, no dignity, he's going to try to get out however he can. And as Roberto rightly pointed out, he'll try to save his daughters and his wife above all. To whom, by the way, as a good father, he's going to try, but as a bad father, he also put them in the situation they're in. The first thing a father who knows what he's doing does, because that thing he said about not having done anything, not even he or anyone else believes it. And he drags his family into it, his poor daughters and his wife, when the first thing he should have done was keep them out of it. Even the mobsters did that, damn it. Mobsters respected their families, kept them out of it. The women just went shopping. And the kids would prosper when the time came. He dragged them into this, which I think is something only a really bad father would do, but of course now he has to try to get out of it. Because it's a weak spot, because it's very hard to see your daughters or your wife being charged. Be careful, they could stand trial. The Infanta did, so watch out. The Infanta was convicted for something as simple as signing documents and claiming she had no idea. which could be true, and she's going to say the same thing. My father used to tell me, and I would tell my father. But it's really shocking, of course, and I think that's going to be the crux of the matter. When he sees his daughters being called before a judge and being told this and that, when he sees the same thing happening to his wife, logically, I think that's when he's going to start to weaken. That's when Zapatero is going to start to crack. That's when he's going to start feeling weak in the knees, and that could be a big part of the success of this operation. Albert, let him sell out whoever he has to sell out. The boss, we all know who that is.
Look, what I do know for sure, and it's obvious because the lawyers in the case say it, is that the prosecutor is going after Sanchez. That is the charges against Coldo, against Santos Serban, the deal with Eldama, with Abalos. Everyone knows who was giving the orders. Everyone knows who they were obeying. And it wasn't Abalos who was number one. That's obvious. It was Sanchez. But the prosecutor can't just say this. He has to prove it, and he needs a witness. And for now, the only one who says it, yes, is a witness, but he's a criminal, and that's Eldama. If instead of Eldama, Zapatero says that, it changes everything completely. It's another point of view where there's nothing to say about Zapatero, Alberto Juan, and Cuyi.
I wanted to give you my opinion about the judge handling Zapatero's case. I think he's a hand-picked judge. I think he's the ideal judge precisely because of what was done with his brother. He'll add or remove things so that it's just enough so that public opinion feels satisfied and so that Zapatero comes out looking good.
For me, the strongest guarantee we Spaniards can have is for the United States to make a move, get involved, and push for legal action against Zapatero or for his extradition. Now that's what I call a strong and independent justice system.
Let Pedro Almodovar hire Zapatero's daughter. Don't you want to be an actress?
Doesn't she want to be an actress? Well then. Hey, listen, Robert, damage control. I'm hearing about it from many places. Maybe they've chosen Kalama to be the judge, not so that he won't judge her, because it's obvious that it's very hard for her to be found innocent, but to make sure it doesn't go any further than that. Do you believe in that theory?
Well, just think about the damage Zapatero would be doing to himself in the name of damage control. It's immense. You have to think that, well, there are things that happen in the movie and sometimes reality outdoes the movies, but I don't think they would dare to do that. In fact, I think that if at any point the United States requests extradition, it will be later on. We'll see. Well, it's also true that justice in Spain is going to be very, very slow. And maybe something from the United States could come first, but I refuse to think that this is just damage control because they're also going after Zapatero's daughters, his wife. I mean, are we doing damage control with this? No, I really think the United States has pushed this, that's for sure, because the information comes from the United States. Let's not forget that. From that agency, which is an agency that works for the Central Intelligence Agency, and all that information is key. Everything that has been taken from that plus ultra person's mobile device, and all of it has been handed over to the prosecutor's office. But I don't think we're dealing with damage control here. But also, in this case, the most incredible thing of all, think about it, is that Zapatero is going to be the only politician who has sunk his party twice. We must not forget that the Socialist Party was mortally wounded. It was practically on the verge of disappearing. In the 2016 elections, Podemos beat them in seats and by a lot. It was 2015 or 2016. I think it was 2015 or 2016. He says. What happened? What happened was that Pedro Sanchez picked up the remains of the Socialist Party and built something new under the facade of the Socialist Party, but it's not the Socialist Party, it's something else. And now it turns out that this too is going to fall, and who's going to bring it down? It's the same person who brought down the Socialist Party back then, Zapatero. I think from a damage control standpoint, it's pretty complicated, isn't it?
It's true that the United States, when asked by media outlets like ours, tells us that they consider what's happening to Zapatero is not a domestic issue. They consider that this is not just Spanish corruption, but that it's necessary to go further and demonstrate his collaboration with the Venezuelan narco regime. And they tell me verbatim in money laundering. And soon enough, the statements from Polo Carvajal and Alex Saab will come out. In fact, Polo Carvajal was supposed to testify recently, but they've been delaying his statement, and the last time they postponed it was because Alex Saab was extradited. Here they go in stages, right? What does Alex Saab know about Polo? What does Polo know about Zapatero? They go step by step. The United States are masters at making people talk. Come on, no problem. They've put Alex Saab in the same prison as Maduro in Brooklyn.
Look, in my opinion, you're touching on a very important point that the real media are missing. Forget about the others. We know which ones they are. It's the United States. The United States is fed up with Spain's attitude in international politics in general, and they're not going to allow it because our geostrategic position is fundamental, Albert. So what's happening? I'm going to put pressure on you. I'm putting pressure on you. Just like they put pressure on Delcy, just like they put pressure on Maduro until they got Maduro and his people handed over. So I'm going to put pressure on you. I put pressure on you with Zapatero. I'm telling Juan so that Pedro Sanchez finds out, and I'm going to keep putting pressure on you unless we reach an agreement. That's where the damage control you're referring to might come in. I'm going to keep putting pressure on you until, well, let's leave it here. But you leave the Prime Minister's office and then we'll have something else in Spain, let's say something more normal. What you're doing is unbearable, because if not, I'm going to keep putting pressure on you until you can't breathe anymore. I think that factor needs to be taken into account by the United States, because it hasn't been a coincidence that all of this was triggered by the United States with their investigations, with their intelligence and so on. And of course, here there was no other choice but to move forward. They have no other option, so that's the issue.
But what you're saying is important. It really is. We said when they removed Maduro that it was going to be a chain reaction, and that's exactly what's happening. Now it's Cuba, now it's Sanchez, now it's Zapatero, and Ortega in Nicaragua should get ready. There will also be time for him before Donald Trump retires. By the way, they thought they were very untouchable. Zapatero placed his alleged frontman, Julito Martinez, with an authority badge at Barajas Airport. That is, when he was coming and going to Venezuela, to tax havens, he used the officials' lounge, as if he were a minister or head of government. And to the Dominican Republic, by the way, that's where he traveled the most. Here, everyone is hooking each other up. Well, you all send me very interesting things. For example, Juan sends me a photo of a UGT demonstration in Orense. The photo is hard to make out because it's far away, and there are so few of them that it's hard to see them. But look there in the background, you see something red, some little banners. Juan says, now they'll say it was a great turnout. Well, there's the photo that makes it clear what they are. And then I was saving this one for you, Bendala and Krobu. The king has made a commercial to encourage the Spanish national soccer team. On the one hand, it's good because at least he's doing something. At least he's doing something since the country is falling apart and he's off in his own world. On the other hand, a summary and my opinion. I've moved you, Roberto. You're crying, I think. What happened to you?
I don't understand this. Look, I think the national soccer team is a national treasure, right? It's a national sport. Well, we've had great successes in recent years. But why do I include the king? Why do they have to leech off of them? I mean, to me, this feels like a PR operation for the king, right? Positioning the king, taking advantage of the situation. Because, of course, if we let the Spanish people choose, what do you like more, the national soccer team or the king? Most will say the national soccer team. So I see it as a marketing operation to bring the king's image closer to something that's at least somewhat prestigious. And it's pathetic that we have to come to this.
Do you agree, Bendala?
I agree, but I would go a little bit further. Well, besides the fact that the text is cheesy as hell, because honestly, those who go out looking at the sky must be the ones who don't lift a finger. Because the rest of us, when we go out, we go out like crazy. Let's see if we can get where we need to go. Or maybe he's the one who goes out to Zarzuela every day to look at the sky. Well, I think it's cheesy. In part, also pretty tacky, and above all, I think, look what I'm going to say, it's old-fashioned. Because with everything that's happening in Spain, with everything that's been happening, with his 12 years of absolute inaction, of doing nothing, even sucking up to this guy, the way Spain is, it's sad and makes you want to cry. For him to come out with this, well, it's clearly a marketing move on his part, but a poor, mediocre one, which I think no Spaniard, no matter what they think of the king, is going to buy. It would have been better if he had just kept quiet. And of course, the next time he goes to a soccer match and people start booing him, whoever they are, he should stand up and declare, that's it, the match is suspended. Because the national anthem is not to be booed while I'm here since I'm the king. We haven't seen this yet. Well, as for this announcement anyway, like I said, it's pathetic, really pathetic.
Absolutely. Speaking of the king, Magdalena and Gloria.
We have a head of state in Spain, and he is the one who has to make sure the Constitution is upheld. The citizen we can't fight against everyone because they don't listen to us.
I've always believed the king could unite us, but they want to remove him, and without the king, we have nothing, ladies and gentlemen. The king is aiding Spain's downfall.
Well, at least he shouldn't be there, and that's one less.
About the civil guard and its high-ranking officers, I have a message from Rafa.
When we talk about the civil guard, we're talking about the police. Is there anyone who's an officer, lieutenant, captain, lieutenant colonel, let alone a general who speaks up or demands anything? The only people who speak are those from the associations, for example, from Judicial, who are civil guards, who are corporals, maybe a sergeant at most. From there down, yes, we're not afraid to speak up, even if disciplined, but none of the higher-ups do.
Why does this happen, Bendala?
It's very simple, because we're living in a time when people get to the top by, I'm going to say it, look, I'm sorry, but here we tell the truth on this show, on your channel, by selling themselves out. That's it.
En tu cadena, a base de bajarse los pantalones. Albert.
Why? For patronage. Why? To climb the ladder. Why? For the position, for the spot, and so on. That's the big problem that both the armed forces and the law enforcement agencies, the civil guard and the police, are facing right now. People who succeed or want to succeed focus on moving up, and once they do, they leave. They stay quiet, they don't even look out for their subordinates. We're seeing it with the terrible deaths that have happened. And of course, in this case, they also don't care about the honor that should be the motto of the civil guard. They're confusing obedience with their own vision and neutrality with their own vision. And that makes them complicit with those we already know, those high-ranking officers who are just posing, but they're not fulfilling their oath to Spain, which is what they owe to the law and to order. And that's also why we're in the situation we're in. A tyrant, a despot, a dictator ultimately stays in power because of law enforcement agencies and the armed forces, because they're the ones who have the power, Albert. That's the harsh reality.
Absolutely. By the way, yesterday we told you that the drug traffickers from Cadiz stole 3 boats from the Navy, which was doing maneuvers in the area, and they stole them in Barbate, not just anywhere, as a symbol. They recorded several videos on the boats stolen from the Spanish army, and they have located them because they abandoned them. In other words, it was a show of force by this drug trafficker who feels so powerful under Sanchez, and how much Marlaska has helped the drug trafficker, of course. It's sad. And the thing about Begoña Gomez deserves a comment, because the latest reports from the UCO, we were discussing them with the lawyer from Haste Oír. They make it clear that everything was illegal. That is to say, Begoña Gomez was not only doing business from Moncloa, but she was also awarding those deals by favoritism. She rigged and falsified public contracts. They knew it was illegal, but she used the Complutense software for commercial purposes and rigged contracts so they would go to whoever she wanted. For example, the contract had to go to Deloitte. Well, there was no bidding process. Coincidentally, Deloitte would win because the bidding process was tailored to them. There, Reales Seguros paid, the La Caixa Foundation paid, and Google paid. Yes, Google paid quite a lot. Telefonica paid 55,000 euros. and then a non-profit sustainability platform, which are the worst, called Human Age Institute. Nearly 200,000 euros in total. That is, this woman used, Roberto, public money to boost her business and kept the cash. That's how it is.
Yes, and the behavioral pattern is the same, but we see it's the same with Zapatero, with Avalos, in all the other cases. It's, I rely on my friends. Instead, I don't care. I prefer to have my friends close to me than to do business. The typical sectarianism of that group, basically, because in the end, anyone would say that Spain is being governed by a cartel. And what are cartels like? Well, they're identified precisely by these kinds of in-group relationships, right? And everything is done. Everything happens within that cartel's usual web of relationships. It's the same modus operandi, Albert, Francisco. And it seems that I think they have it. I mean, they're brought up in their own ideology. The ideology that they all share, I think, produces that behavior. And it's part of, I think, that's why they see it as so normal. That's why Zapatero thinks he did everything right, because they think, well, I declared it to the tax authorities. Okay, but what did you declare to the tax authorities? What did you report to the tax authorities? The money you earned, it's good you reported it. That's the least we expected. The problem is you earned that money by giving jobs to friends and doing business through them.
Man, there's an account in the latest UDEF report, which is over 100 pages. There's an account from the scheme where they deposit 500,000 euros into that account. And right after that, what a coincidence, Zapatero and Sonsoles pay off a 500,000 euro mortgage all at once for a piece of land. Things like that. Who pays off a €500,000 mortgage all at once? Who? Come on, seriously.
If you haven't, one pasapalabra.
All right, let's go to the newsroom. Susana Gash, latest messages.
Greetings from the Castillon Confidential Newsroom. We're receiving many messages, including one from Carmen Reyes. It's a pleasure to greet you. To all the panelists as well. I am Hispanic Venezuelan, the daughter of Spanish migrants who came to Venezuela during the post-war period. I am already in Spain. I came with my children and I have been living in the motherland for 10 years now. People are going very hungry and no one says anything. And everything is rising rapidly and no one can afford it. The question we all ask ourselves is, where is the reconstruction of the country? It's already been 3 months and people are worse off. I have worked for many years in the oil sector. I always worked for foreign consortiums, but who would dare to invest in Venezuela if there is still no rule of law? Alberto Ruiz also writes to ask us for a favor, that Albert Castellon talk about Peru. Peru is a Hispanic American country par excellence. A moment of your time, Albert Castellon, to expose to the world the tremendous fraud that is being committed by the progressive forces led by the São Paulo Forum. Through the Peruvian electoral bodies as accomplices to take away our right to freedom and the development we long for so much. Unfortunately, they are implementing the Venezuelan system with the intervention of Venezuelan and Cuban personnel embedded in that electoral body, OMP. Help us talk about this issue just as you have spoken about Cuba and are also speaking about Venezuela. Also, our friend, in this case Maria, our friend, says, Ivono, when is it your turn? Because this guy also has his own issues. Maybe the bomb will explode in his face too. Tone says that those of us in my WhatsApp group who voted for the Popular Party are very angry, that neither Feijó nor Telado nor Ayuso attended the demonstration. Let's think this over, but we must not forget that the enemy is Sanchez. Paloma tells us that the video is beautiful, the one we posted with a recap of that Saturday's demonstration. What we want is for it to be published just so we can share it on social media. That's what we're going to do, Paloma. We're going to make a special clip so you can share it too. Maria Jesus says that she discovered this channel not long ago, and now when I wake up, the first thing I do is look for it to listen to it. Leo also writes to us saying, I congratulate you and everyone who participated in the big demonstration against all this mafia that is governing us. I send you a big hug from Portugal and I watch you every day. In this case, Isa says, it was impressive. I was there with my wife and my dog Sancho, and honestly, we really enjoyed it. Our Spanish flag held high, and above all, we saw you working bravely, even with that heat. Congrats on the show, the panelists, and all the insiders as our numbers keep growing. We're going to leave it here, Albert, but it's important that you follow us on all social media and also on our digital newspaper, CastellonConfidential.com, where we post all the news. Thank you very much. Yes.
A hug. A listener was asking about Ayuso, why she wasn't at the demonstration. Yesterday, Marcos de Quinto already told us that she wanted to go and send him a WhatsApp message of support, but the Popular Party didn't let her. Which also worries me, because if Ayuso has the guts she shows for certain things, she should have them within her own party too, not just outside it. Listen to Lola, who is as angry as I am.
I would tell Mrs. Ayuso that instead of sending WhatsApp messages to Marcos de Quinto, what she should have done today is resign as president of the Community of Madrid and give up her seat as a deputy of the Popular Party. Because from the podium in her community, she's a very combative lady and, well, she's a very good speaker. But of course, then she doesn't have freedom of expression or thought to do what she should have done, which is to support the protest driven by public frustration.
I have my theory. I don't know what Robert thinks, that if Feiju goes with Ayuso, they would boo Feiju and applaud Ayuso. That's why they decided that neither of them would go.
I think it was Feiju who wasn't going, and they didn't want Ayuso to take all the spotlight. The problem is there. It's a matter of people, right? They don't want one person to be above the top leader of the Popular Party. We're in a partytocracy. No matter how much we think Ayuso has more personality, that she might have more potential and also more strength and drive than Feiju, I think it's an internal matter because the party's spokesperson in the Senate was there.
He put on a show. He left Genova, went into the crowd, posed for a photo, made a statement, and went back to Genova. This is so strange.
But I also want to say something. Many times we've criticized political parties that have gone to demonstrations, hijacking them with their little flags, with their logos, when civil society was driving it. So, for once, when civil society is taking action and there are no political parties and you don't see any little flags, well, I mean, I honestly appreciate that things turned out this way.
There were flags of Vox and of Se Acabó la Fiesta. This time it would have been allowed, and it was announced that there would be as many PP flags as they wanted. What they can't do is boycott the event for 15 days. Of course, at the last minute, when they see it's a success, they rush out to get in the photo. Or El Mundo and ABC publish, called by Vox and the Popular Party. What do you mean, called by Vox and the Popular Party? It was called by civil society. They joined later, didn't they? To me, it seems like a brutal act of cowardice that really shows what the Popular Party is. And I just ask you, look, when Melania Trump arrived at the White House, there was a campaign that said, "Free Melania," right? Like Free Willy, that orca from the movie. Well, so I say to the Popular Party, free Ayuso. Please, let Ayuso be free. Free Ayuso. The day Ayuso leaves the Popular Party, we'll see the true dimension of Ayuso, and if she really is, as she seems to be, which I'm convinced she is. But if it takes much longer, she's already been there for 7, 8 years holding on. That's enough, please. Free her.
Less calculation from Ayuso, less WhatsApp, as the Confidential said, and you've missed an opportunity, Ayuso, to take a step forward. You haven't done it because you're concerned about your political career, right?
Well, gentlemen, thank you for being here. A big hug to both of you. Take care.
Goodbye, Roberto. A hug. See you later.
Well, I have data, figures, embezzled public money, Pablo Cambronero in 1 minute.
You are listening to Castillon Confidential.
If you'll allow me, I'd like to ask your permission. When we were hacked, we quickly opened a channel that we called Castillon Confidential SOS. We were there for 5 days, broadcasting whenever we could, until they shut it down again. Well, what can I say? We have a subscriber base there that I'd like to put to good use and make worthwhile, and with your permission, Since we already have other channels, if it happens again and we've taken measures, we'd like to transform that channel in Tu Cuerpo Sabe 2.0 with the strength of the subscription it already has, and with your support, I'm sure that channel, which as you know belongs to my daughter and the Confidenciales family, we want it to grow even more. We added new interviews, we added another way of understanding science and the body. To those who subscribe to Tu Cuerpo Sabe, I ask you again to subscribe to Tu Cuerpo Sabe 2.0 at Tu Cuerpo Sabe 2.0. You will be surprised.
For several months, this place has been the home of Tu Cuerpo Sabe. Here we've talked about things your body does without you noticing. But sometimes, even the things we like need to be renewed, not because a stage ends, but because a new one begins. And while everything seemed to be changing, we were preparing something better, a new image, more professional videos, a more polished format, and something that many of you had asked me for. Interviews with experts related to the channel's topics to take things a step further. And also, we want to listen to you more than ever. Very soon, you'll have a contact email to send us real experiences, which could even appear in future videos. Because Tu Cuerpo Sabe is changing. But the essence remains the same. This is just getting started.
Follow us on all platforms, and remember that to find us on YouTube, you need to put the @ before our Tu Cuerpo Sabe 2.0. We'll be waiting for you on the new channel.
Gentlemen, we have such a generous, so supportive government. It helps other countries so much, right? Without asking for anything in return. Africa, Latin America, any corner of the world where there is someone, a non-governmental organization, a women's association that needs funding. There is Spain, the judiciary of the Dominican Republic, the judges, the police. There is Spain. If Morocco needs new trains, tracks, there is Spain. It's wonderful, isn't it? To live in such a rich country, as immensely rich as Spain, that throws money away. Pablo Cambronero tells me that this year, in 2025, it's the largest amount in history. He gives us the figure. Pablo Cambronero, welcome. How are you?
Hello, Albert. Well, as I always tell you, it's already a classic. I'm very pleased to be here with you to talk about how our government spends our money.
Well, since we have plenty, what does it matter?
Yes, that seems to be the case.
What's the record amount? Remind me, in 2025, because such a high figure has never been reached before.
That's right. We're talking about the International Development Cooperation figures for the Spanish state in 2025, 4,500,000,000 euros. 4,500,000,000 euros. Let's analyze what that amount of money means. Some people might even have to convert it or change it to pesetas to really understand what it is. It's an incredible amount of money. And most of that has gone to entities that are extremely, extremely, extremely opaque. So we can imagine the worst.
We're talking about 12,300,000 euros every day, or in other words, a little more than 500,000 every hour. That is, every day I do this show, which lasts an hour and a half, we lose almost 1,000,000 euros. You have to be very rich to spend that much. Pablo, a lot.
The truth is, and that's just incorporation. The truth is that when you do these kinds of calculations, which you've done masterfully, you really become aware of the amount of cash, of money that Spain has to give away or to hand over to opaque entities. I repeat, because you really have to focus on the opacity of these entities that supposedly receive, mind you, the money. So, of course, 500,000 an hour, more than 500,000 euros per hour. That's a huge house per hour given away abroad to opaque entities. It's something worth studying.
Whenever I talk to you, you always mention the opacity of the associations that receive them. Are you questioning whether the money actually gets there or whether the amount they say gets there actually does? Look, I have Rosa, a listener who has left a question for you.
I would like Pablo Cambronero to be asked if in these donations given for the development of other countries there is any for the fight against drug trafficking and drug addiction.
Is there any donation which would make more sense than any other against drug addiction?
In international cooperation, I haven't seen any. Yeah, I've been analyzing international cooperation for 4 years. I haven't seen any efforts to combat drug trafficking in international cooperation. I haven't seen it yet.
Curious, isn't it? For some things, yes. For others, no. For example, €500,000 for Bolivia. Well, in the end, that's the budget for an hour. It's not that much. So what's it for?
Of course, this is an hour. This is basically an hour of work of saying, well, work in quotes, of saying, well, yes, €500,000 that I reported in the Tiochetiv newspaper that went to Bolivia. And the call for applications is worth looking at because it's also short. When they're short, you also have to analyze each of the words. Useful energy balance. So it costs us €500,000 to prepare it, supposedly by an entity called the Latin American Energy Organization. And well, this Latin American Energy Organization supposedly has the task of making an assessment, a study of the usefulness of energy in Bolivia. That pays effort, meaning that we are the ones who pay. I have to say that in this case, I did find a trace of that assessment on the website of this public entity. Mind you, this public entity, and yes, it does come with the EFID logo. There is indeed a useful energy assessment in which the final objectives are to make the assessment. That's all we know. We've been paid to do an assessment, and on the website, the assessment says it needs to be done. And that's where the information ends.
$500,000 to say what we already knew. Hey, there are a lot of thanks being given because for $500,000, the media should be full of it. And I've seen very few. From whoever, from Anacardo, from Senegal, from the Dominican police. Where are those thank you, Spain, for paying us so much?
Well, maybe you and I don't get them, but maybe someone else does get some special thanks. And I put that in the biggest quotation marks possible. To give an example, the thanks we get, for example, from Sheinbaum, from Mexico. A lot of money goes to Mexico, which I have analyzed several times, and one day we have to address it. We send quite a lot of corporation money to Mexico, and the thanks we get is that they ask us for something every so often, that we should apologize for God knows what. So, well, for having brought them civilization, that's why they ask us to apologize if you'll pardon the redundancy. So that's the kind of gratitude we receive. We don't receive any kind of gratitude as a nation, but maybe someone else does get some kind of reward or thanks.
Hey, you live in Sevilla. I guess you went to vote last Sunday. Everyone already knows what happened, which is pretty much the same as Aragon, Extremadura, Castilla-León. Here, people are clear about what needs to be done. How is Sevilla now that a few days have passed?
Well, Sevilla is, to be honest, in the circles I move in, because obviously my social circle isn't very broad, and I live in the capital, and the atmosphere is like, hey, well, happiness. We're happy because the right has won, because the right takes a continuity-based approach to governing. But at the same time, there's a special kind of happiness, which I personally share as well. Because there's another party that's going to come in to analyze, audit, and oversee Moreno Banila's government. Well, I've been analyzing during this time, both during the campaign and before it, that he was spending quite a lot of public money. Also, precisely what we always talk about in cooperation and many other things, which I consider to be a system inherited from the Socialist Party, absolutely inoperative. So I'm happy.
Look, a few days ago, I was reviewing the money that the government of the Junta of Andalusia gives to UGT and Comisiones Obreras. Well, the same amount for each, €1,770,000 a year for UGT and the same for Comisiones Obreras. So in total, almost €4 million a year to both unions. These are the things that sometimes you just can't understand, right?
I don't understand it, neither at the national level nor at the regional level, that you have to pay off the unions to get social peace or buy social peace from the unions with public money. I've always argued that every organization, including political parties, should receive zero subsidies and be funded only by what they're able to collect from their own membership fees. But, well, it's the same as always. It's about maintaining a system that has always worked and that seems to only work if you keep pouring public money into it. In my humble opinion, I think we need to do a reset. I think we need to put an end to these kinds of privileges because what they really create is a dependency that ultimately harms the citizen and, above all, the worker. Also, they don't feel represented except by those paid with public funds. Therefore, they don't defend the rights of the workers, they defend their own existence, and that's a problem.
I was surprised that you published what the confidential reports are showing. The amount that the Andalusian regional government spends in development aid on a socialist non-governmental organization. Tell me about it.
Well, the Andalusian regional government has its own Andalusian Agency for International Development Cooperation, which also seems to me like maintaining an apparatus and a bureaucracy that is absolutely unnecessary. But, well, that's just my humble opinion. And I saw that they spend quite a lot of public money on this kind of aid to foreign entities. I was especially surprised, as you rightly point out, Movement for Peace, Disarmament and Freedom. This is a progressive and secular non-governmental organization. That's how they define themselves. Inside, you'll find the leading members of the Socialist Party, including those still active. The board of directors is full of socialists, some of whom are still members of Spain's Congress, and there are people in the Senate too. So, well, this non-governmental organization, which is also one of the NGOs that receives the most money from the state, that's something to keep in mind. It gets much more money from the Spanish state than the UN itself. Remember, this would need a study. I've done a detailed study, but for example, the Andalusian regional government, as we discussed, and I can confirm the dates, from January 2022 until April 2026. Until very recently, it has given about 2,700,000 euros to this non-governmental organization.
But why a popular party government then with an absolute majority, almost 3 million to a socialist non-governmental organization? Why?
Good question, but it's not the worst case since there's an even worse one also involving a popular party government. Valencian Community, it gives 6.2 million euros in the same period of time. Of course, with this non-governmental organization, a pretty thorough study needs to be done to see what the heck this money is being spent on. Because on the website, they also don't make it very clear what they do, how they do it, where they do it, why they do it, or how much it costs to do it. So there's something fishy here.
The president of Movimiento por la Paz was the former Socialist Party mayor of Fuenlabrada, and he still is. And it's true that the board of directors is full of senior Socialist Party officials. I don't get it. 6 million for Valencia, almost 3 for Seville, Andalusia, plus what the Spanish government gives them, which is already huge. In the end, they're going to get more with peace than with the Red Cross.
Well, in the same time period we've talked about, 2022 to 2026, the state gives them 65.5 million euros. Just so you understand the amounts we're discussing.
This non-governmental organization will definitely go over 100 million euros in 4 years.
Easily. And it's also a key, frequent, and influential collaborator in the regularization process. That's interesting too.
Yeah, of course. That's what friends are for. Well, gentlemen, Andalusia has turned this situation around. He explained what all of Spain says when it goes to the polls. That yes, the popular party should govern, but never with an absolute majority. They want someone to keep the popular party in check because they don't trust them. I think that's the most obvious interpretation. Now, the ones who need to understand this are both sides, the politicians. You were there. You were a member of parliament. Besides being a police officer, you were never a politician by vocation, but those who were born into a party like Sanchez and so many others and grow up within it, they don't think like you and me. They think differently, don't they?
Of course, look, political parties in the end they seek their own victory, the way they think things should be run. But it's clear that you have to be flexible, especially when we have such an obvious threat. And that threat is in Moncloa. It's a huge threat. Therefore, I think we need to put a little bit of sectarianism aside and say, let's be useful, let's fight against the great enemy at the top. And for that, we have to unite and make policies, not only to fight against them, but also to fight against the policies that this man is carrying out and that are making us poorer day after day. We can't keep doing more of the same, so I'm glad the Popular Party doesn't have an absolute majority in Andalusia. I'm not criticizing the Popular Party, but they've managed things the same way for years. And now it needs that break, that extra set of eyes that Vox has to provide to achieve what I've been pursuing since I entered politics, which is the efficient management of public spending, something that nobody considers.
I'm going to share something that happened to me years ago. Barcelona Provincial Council. I was a deputy, and the president of the provincial council at that time was a socialist, someone I trusted. They have a chain of radio stations called La Zarxa, which still exists. I mean, the network in Catalan. They were losing many millions every year, and it cost public money to keep it running. I explained to him that there was a plan, and I explained it very simply to make it profitable. And when I told him the plan, he said, "But there's only one problem, Albert. Where do we put all the people we've given jobs to there who are from the party and who wouldn't have a job otherwise?" And it's still there 25 years later, losing money every year. That's
courage, Albert. Courage, it takes courage. And it takes a leader or several leaders who don't care about losing their seat.
Of course.
Who care about Spain's future and their children's future. It's that kind of long-term vision is hard to find right now, but I think there are people capable of doing that. I hope I'm not wrong.
Pablo Cambronero, police officer, former member of parliament, and now an analyst of what we pay in taxes. This man should be the Minister of Finance. I would trust him a lot. A big hug, Pablo. Take care.
He would have too many enemies and very few friends, Albert. A big hug.
You would do well.
And as always, it's a real pleasure to be with you, Albert.
Hugs. Thank you, Deborah from Germany, for your kind messages.
Thank you for being there in Madrid. Thank you. Even though many of us can't be there, I'm sending a hug from Germany, and many more should be there.
Kisses. There are people who are far away. I understand that. There are people whose health doesn't allow them to walk 3 or 4 kilometers under the sun. I completely understand, really. Pedro, thank you very much for sending the photo of the mugs from the show that you asked for and of the Catalan Bichi. This is like a sanctuary now. It looks like an altar. Thank you, Pedro. Fräulein Nister has made Mondays sad in Moncloa.
The world doesn't make sense. What a disgrace. This is so boring.
Sanchidad, what's wrong with you?
I'm sad, Mortadelo. Life has no meaning. I feel a great emptiness.
Don't talk nonsense. Let's do something fun. Come on, Sanchidad. Put a booger on this far-right woman. That always cheers you up. A ride in the Falcon to go buy bread while you watch the poor from above is always fun, right?
It's always the same. Yeah? Who is it?
Hi, is Ruben there?
Which Ruben?
Ruben, last name Tilador.
What? Ruben Tilador? Alberto, who was it? Nothing, it was Mortadelo again.
Say it, Margarita. Pedro loves it.
I'm such an airhead. I'm such an airhead.
Margarita Robles.
He did a pretty poor job.
Come in, Sanchidad. Spending some time in the Hall of Mirrors always cheers you up. Come on, Sanchidad, don't cry.
What's all this noise? What's wrong with him now?
The young master is sad, Mrs. Begonia. I think it's because since all his shameless friends have been arrested or have been charged, he doesn't have anyone to have fun with anymore.
Dad already told me he was a wimp and a coward. Come on, crybaby. What's wrong with you now? Are we doing this again?
But little one, it's just that I...
Neither little one nor little guy. Right now, stop whining because there's plenty to steal.
There's plenty to steal, and they've been stealing for 8 years. Congratulations. I love the memes. Enrique sends me one that says, job offer in Soto del Real. Zapatero needed in prison. I'll just leave it there. Saku, I love yours. The Calao Metro Station will now have the face of King Felipe VI. There's always Calao, no matter what happens. And the great tracksuit that Frank sent me is magnificent, and Trump is already looking at it closely. That great tracksuit that Maduro put on. This one has the name Rodriguez Zapatero on the lapel. And Zapatero runs away dressed as a Bolivarian, which is very chueca. Enrique sent this.
They're following me. I need to leave the country. Go to Chueca. My contact will give you a new identity and a passport. Honey, here you go. I'm going to miss you, pirate. I know. Relax, boss. He won't even have eyebrows left.
Please, and of course they finish him off. Now Zapatero and Sanchez are sworn enemies. And finally, imagine if the Peugeot gang was stopped by a civil guard checkpoint and this happened. All four of them inside the car and the civil guard stops them.
Documents, please.
What's going on, officer?
Get out of the car now.
It shoots out, and when it fires, a very strange white powder comes out.
I don't know, damn it. It all happened so fast. Call number 1. Tell him we're coming for him now, that we've had a delay. We'll meet at the inn.
At the Teruel Inn, what happened next you already know. I don't need to tell you, and it's not suitable for minors. More tomorrow, friends. We're still in the trenches. Thanks for being there.
Tú lo sabes y yo lo sé. Somos confidenciales. Tú eres confidencial. Yo soy confidencial. Todos confidenciales. Todos confidenciales. Pero solo para mentes abiertas y para gente despierta. Desde la trinchera las balas silban y no hay manera de salir allá afuera. Aquí la libertad tiene las alas de cera. Albert Castillo, Susana Gash, Tucci Castillo y demás. Muchas gracias. Skitskadelidu, badadelidu, con esto y un bizcocho. Hasta mañana a las 8.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.